Hi friends, and welcome back to another episode of the I Owe It to Myself podcast as we start to dive into the third book of the Crescent City series, which is The House of Flame and Shadow. Now, the recording where I was sharing my thoughts about these chapters happened a little while ago. I'm now coming to edit the episode. I'm giving you a proper introduction to this recording while I am editing it. This actually comes at an interesting time though, because the more that we get close to ACOTAR, while I feel like people have always talked a lot about it, the more things are coming out about it. And this actually isn't something that I think is new information. And I kind of laugh about it because I truly think I just did a good job of putting all my blinders on when I was reading the series, because I feel like I was kind of part of the second wave of fandom for ACOTAR. And so I was behind compared to some other people. And I really didn't spoil anything for myself when I read the series the first time. And I think because of that, and potentially because I've always kind of done that for SJM books, I did not realize that there was bonus chapters. So I was scrolling social media the other day and I saw a woman talking about the fact that there are bonus chapters. And so that was news to me. So what I went ahead and did is I read the bonus chapters for Crescent City that I could up until the point where I'm not spoiling anything for myself. I think for House of Flame and Shadow, there's one more bonus chapter I can read during the book, and then there's two after, and then there's one that is in relation to House of Earth and Blood, but they say that you should read it after this third book. So there's 3 bonus chapters that I will read after this book is done, and then one while I'm still finishing it. So 4 more that I will read in total for this book. And then I've read all the other ones for Crescent City, which I'll talk about here in a second. But the part that I find kind of exciting is that there are some for ACOTAR as well. And when I do my reread, as we get prepared for the new release of the 6th book, I will read those bonus chapters when I do that. So that is really exciting. And I think that it gives me something new to look forward to. I've also talked about this in the past, but I have seen a couple of different creators who have done some summaries and recaps of some of those books and characters that I feel like I will appreciate having that when I am reading those books. I've saved videos so long ago now, but I want to go back and find a couple of those videos that people have posted that could be something that I listen to as I read the books when I do my re-record, or that I do in preparation for the re-record. But either way, I think it's just exciting because now there's so much content that is out for ACOTAR books and SJM books in general because they have just resurged in popularity. And I think it kind of makes it a little bit of a new experience for reading ACOTAR now versus when I did for the first time. The last thing that I want to say actually goes back to the bonus chapters that I have read for Crescent City now. And one of them that I read was for this book, you can read it after chapter 16. And it was in relation to Therian and the Witch Queen Hypoxia. I don't think that there's a ton that I feel like I have been getting out of the chapters that I have read for Crescent City that I missed originally for these books. But there was something about this that was interesting to me, which is that Therian is commenting on how he really feels like they clicked right away as friends and they have this connection. Like he says, I just felt this comfort with her and this connection with her right away. And I don't know that he has really talked about friendship with anybody like that. I think he's realized how much everybody who's in this group of main characters that we have is his chosen family and how much he appreciates them and loves them. But I don't think that when this interaction had happened with him and Hypoxia that he had had that revelation yet. He gets there, but even still, I don't feel like it happens often where he talks about them in such a way of fondness and closeness. And again, we do eventually get to that part and that version of Cormac more, especially in book 3. And some of the chapters that I'm referring to, especially the one with him and Hypoxia, were a part of book 2. So he hadn't evolved to that just yet. But what was interesting about it, aside from his comments on the closeness of him and Hypoxia from his point of view, was the fact that she talks about how she's a necromancer. And for some reason, I don't know that she has talked about that before. I don't know if we know that about her. we know that she can interact with the dead because her and Ethan do in past books, but I don't think that we knew that and I did not remember it, or this is the first time that I'm hearing it. But it stood out to me because of where I am in this third book. So while this is a real-time introduction for the first 19 chapters of this book, I have already continued reading and I'm actually getting ready to record my second set of thoughts for this read-along series. And this comes into play much more by that point. And so I think it just stood out to me because of that. And part of me was intrigued by it because she says that when people come back, they are not the same as they were before. And if I was understanding correctly, she was saying that they have to find a new body to be in. In some ways, I think that makes sense because when someone dies, obviously their body dies and it starts to decompose and all of that stuff. So it would make sense that if she's bringing them back, it's the spirit of them and like what is within, not the body and the physical form itself. But I don't think that has ever been talked about yet in the book so far. So while I missed this bonus chapter when I was reading book 2 originally, having read it now, and especially with where we're at in book 3, it just is an interesting tidbit. So I don't know if it is going to make a difference or if it's going to be something that matters, but it feels very SJM-esque that it will, especially because it was mentioned in a bonus chapter and not as a part of the core book. My other struggle with that is I don't feel like she would put something so important or meaningful in a bonus chapter and not as part of the core book, because people like me could have not known or not ever decided to read the bonus chapters. We will see if it is an Easter egg that comes to really matter. But all of that to say, I think because I'm getting prepped for the ACOTAR reread coming soon, and because I'm designing thumbnails and getting some of the social media stuff ready, it makes me excited to finally be doing it. And I just am really glad that it's coming at a time where we are going to get 2 books. And obviously we get one in October and then we have to wait until January. And so that wait is going to be a little bit of a brutal wait. But I also think I saw somebody said that this first book is smaller than the first book in ACOTAR. But of course, you have to remember it's 2 parts. It's part 1 and then part 2 is in January. So technically it was 1 book that she split into 2. But I know that some people are already really bummed that it was smaller than even the first book. I think people are just going to read through it so fast. But it's all just because we're excited and because we love what SJM puts forward for us. So all of that to say, really excited to see where that all goes. Excited to hear your thoughts about what you think about these first set of chapters from this book. And I'm excited that we are on book 3 of Crescent City and we're getting ready to round out this series here very quickly, where we're going to be done with Crescent City for a little while because there's no more books to read. So I thank you all for being here, and I'm really glad to share my thoughts with you about these chapters. So let's go ahead and dive in. In this episode, we are going to be talking about chapters 1 through 19 as we read the 3rd book in the Crescent City series, House of Flame and Shadow. It has taken me a little bit to pick up this book, and I think it is because I've been a little bit anxious about how the interaction with Bryce and the characters from ACOTAR was going to go. I mentioned this in a past episode, but I'll briefly say again that of all the things that I have seen about Crescent City, truly I had not seen anything about how much interaction Bryce was going to have with these characters. So when people were talking about the possibility of there being a crossover book, while I understood why that may happen from SJM's perspective, I had no idea how much interaction they had in this book, that in knowing that, it would make even more sense for a book of all of these characters from Crescent City and ACOTAR to come together. And now that I have read even these 19 chapters, I fully understand why people are saying that, because so far we have seen nothing but Bryce with the characters from ACOTAR, and that is actually blowing my mind. I truly can't believe that it was never spoiled for me. I thought that it was just a small interaction. I thought that there was just like some assumed situation of her going and having interaction with them. I really didn't know that they actually already came together in this book and already have had as much of a crossover as they were going to have. So I'm pretty blown away by that. And that's where I actually want to start. I'm blown away by the fact that we've gotten this much of the book so far, and the entire perspective from Bryce's point of view and her story is with the characters of ACOTAR. Again, I thought that it might be like a small thing that we get explained later, that Bryce was going to jump into this world, have some shit go down and go back, and then as she was back and working through the issues with the Asteri, we were going to hear the story of things that happened, and it would always just be kind of like assumed or implied that it was some of the characters from ACOTAR. But I'm a fourth of the way through this book roughly already, and everything from her perspective is with them. So it's a weird place to be, because as a fan of ACOTAR and who's read all of SJM's other books, and now obviously reading Crescent City, it's a weird feeling to have to bring together the characters of Crescent City with the characters of ACOTAR because of how different their settings were and their worlds were. And obviously, as you've been reading along with me, you'll know that they bridge some of those gaps, right? They're bridging language gaps, they're bridging gaps of time, and Bryce is telling them about all of these things, about cell phones and about guns and weapons and all of this stuff that they never have experienced in their world. And so that interaction of just conversation between the characters, they're bridging that time gap through those conversations. But it's funny because I had this thought of like, when I was reading ACOTAR, you just know that you're in this like fantasy world and you don't really think about the things that aren't there. Like, I never went into those books and was like, well, they don't have televisions. Like, why not? It never dawned on me, because why would it? I'm at the whim of the story and the world that's being set out before me based on what the author wants to say with this story. I'm not going to question why modern day stuff isn't in it. It never crossed my mind. And so it's funny now when Bryce and Nesta have these conversations and Nesta's like, what is that thing? Like, you call it a phone, but what is it? We've been trying to figure out how it works and we don't understand it. And to see Bryce explain it to her of like capturing moments with perfect clarity, and you can like call somebody else and talk to them in real time. They don't know anything about that, because that is way, way in the future of the timeline that they're in. It doesn't change my perspective and feeling towards the characters in ACOTAR, but I just never saw them in that light. There was never any reason in those stories to question it. Even the fact of when Feyre and Nesta and Elaine were human, it wasn't like the human world had TVs and phones and the Fey world didn't, and they came together. We never saw any of that. There was never a question of like technology or anything. The story just was what it was, and the worlds just were what they were. And I, as a reader, was never really questioning that. So this is the first time where I'm put into this place where you realize just how much Bryce is in modern day compared to them. And I knew that, like, I knew going in that Crescent City was going to be the most modern day. And you have that at odds with each other, because you have her in this world with things like computers and phones and TVs, but then there are these characters that are ancient, right? You have angels and you have Asteri and all of this stuff. So it was always a weird thing for me to kind of place those things, because I was used to coming from these kind of older times, from ACOTAR or even Throne of Glass, because it was always just implied, and you just knew by the lack of some of those things and modern day mentions that you weren't in the world that we are in. You're not in the 2000s, right? You're not in these, 2020s. We are so far removed from that. So it's just a very odd thing, and definitely kind of comical and funny to have Bryce explain these things to them and to realize just the difference in time compared to each other, because I never really questioned it. And again, I knew coming into Crescent City it was more modern, so I definitely had to like process that and put my brain in that space for this type of story to know it was more modern. But I was never thinking back to ACOTAR and questioning stuff. I was just always taking Crescent City at face value, just like I did for ACOTAR. And so now when they're kind of faced up against each other, it is just kind of a really funny and humorous interaction. The other thing that I want to touch on is how much of this is Nesta and Azriel. I find that very interesting. I am curious if we are going to get an explanation as to why it ends up being them. I think that the land has been laid of it being Nesta because Nesta gets called to objects that are made. So when they knew that Bryce had something in her back and they pulled Nesta in to look at it or to like sense it, and Nesta's like, yeah, I can sense it. So we know that it's cauldron made. Obviously, Nesta then appearing later in this book to follow Bryce through these tunnels, she says like, yeah, I was sent or whatever to like follow you and escort you and whatever. But I think it is because they know that Nesta has this connection. So if she has to do something to wield this object or weapon or go up against somebody who is wielding a made object, she of all people could do it because she can wield made objects such as the mask. With Azriel, I would assume that the only reason why he's around is because he has the dagger and or the knife. They call it kind of both in this story. They seem to reference it in both ways, but he has the knife that corresponds to her sword, and they have this magical connection, right? And he carries the sword with him in this instance of going through the tunnel, so he has both weapons on his person. Could that have been Cassian? Could that have been Rhys? Maybe, but I do think that because he's the knife's owner, the dagger's owner, whatever you want to call it, and then this whole connection with the sword, that it just made sense for it to be him by default. You also could obviously just argue that he's one of the most lethal warriors, so it makes sense, but I think that because of him having that knife and all of the skills that he has, that it made sense to be him. But it is a very interesting group of people. Cassian and Nesta would have been expected because they're mates. Feyre was never really going to be involved because there's no way in hell Rhysand would let her go without him being there. Rhysand was never probably going to go because he obviously... this is a moment where I think he's kind of like too good for the situation. Like he needs to have his people kind of flesh out what's happening with this visitor, and you know, they don't know the threat level yet, but he's going to kind of protect his people and his family and whatever. Because in this story, one thing that is interesting to note is when Nesta wears the mask and Azriel has to like talk her out of it because the mask is its own sentient being. And so she's not Nesta when she wears it. She's this like death god. He mentions that Nox is there. So this is at a point in the story of ACOTAR where they are very much living their family life, Feyre, Rhysand, and Nox. So Rhysand has things to protect at home. He was never going to volunteer himself. So again, all these things said, it makes sense why I guess it's Nesta and Azriel as I talk through it. But I did have a moment in reading these chapters where I was like, it's just interesting to me. Nesta and Azriel have never been like besties. And she obviously has had a very complicated relationship with every character in the ACOTAR books. So to see them working together, this feels meaningful in their relationship building. And I was surprised by that. Again, getting as much text as we are getting with ACOTAR characters, I am surprised because now I'm getting their story too. Like I have to remember, this isn't just, yes, I'm reading Crescent City, and yes, it is Bryce, but I'm getting real-time ACOTAR. You're getting both books in one. And if you can hear in my voice, I'm so stoked about that because I just so wasn't expecting it. And so I have to also remember that I am heavily invested in those characters. And so to be getting more of them and their growth and evolution together, like this whole experience is going to mean something to them. And this is, how do I even explain this? I'm trying to make sense of this to try to explain to somebody who maybe isn't as invested in this, who could be reading these books, to understand the impact of this. I would assume though, if you are doing this read along, that you would have read ACOTAR, and then maybe you love these characters as much as I do, so maybe you understand it, but I feel compelled to just explain this. We got a set of characters in ACOTAR that I fell absolutely in love with. All of them in different ways, you know, some more than others, but all of them in some way, shape, or form, I really enjoy their stories and I'm invested in their stories. So when you take that group of characters and then now you have all of these characters from Crescent City, and obviously I'm reading this book. This is the third in this set of books. You know, they're massive books. I've invested time. I'm going to see this through. I now have some affinity towards these characters as well. You are reading a book about them and their scenario of trying to defeat this evil and trying to survive, but you bring in these other characters that you already know and love. To have these two stories merge, it is a very weird experience because, again, like I was just explaining, you're seeing growth of both worlds, of both sets of characters. They obviously overlap. They obviously are related. That's why we are here. But when you have so much affinity for both, you're reading from Bryce's perspective, but you're watching this experience of these other characters too. You're getting two stories in one, because if SJM wrote a book about this or wrote this scene in an ACOTAR book, it would be from Nesta and Azriel's perspective about this visitor. I could see the whole thing play out in the same exact way, from their perspective, from their hesitation, their questioning, them, understanding that she's luring out the worm, even though she thinks she's being sly and they're not catching on to it, them fighting and defeating this thing, Nesta putting on the mask. Like I can put myself in the shoes as if this was an ACOTAR story from their perspective, but that's not the case. It's a Crescent City story from Bryce's perspective, and these characters that I know and love are involved, but you're seeing two separate situations because of the investment that I have in both sets of these characters and their both respective worlds, and that is a very weird place to be in. I never really thought about what the experience would be like to have these characters come together in a book. I've always been open to it and excited about it, but it was just like, we're just going to see what happens. But now that we are already here, it is a little bit challenging in ways because I'm trying to stay grounded in the fact that this is a Crescent City story. And it's easier to do that because you're getting so many other perspectives at the same time of the characters of this story. But this perspective of Bryce for these 19 chapters is in the ACOTAR world. And so it is like you're being pushed into the ACOTAR world in the middle of a Crescent City story. And it's just a very odd feeling. Clearly, I'm having a hard time describing it. I am enjoying the experience. I am very curious of how many more chapters that this is going to carry on for and how she's going to leave her relationship with the ACOTAR characters. But it's just a very interesting place to be. And I definitely did not see this coming. And so far, I'm really, really enjoying it. The thing that I will say is it is quite difficult for the story to jump around from so many characters' perspectives for as long as it has been. I've read through chapter 19. There is like 102 chapters of this book. So we're roughly at about 200 some pages, and we're roughly about a fourth of the way through this book. That's a lot of ground to cover. And even in the same chapters, you're jumping between perspectives of people. So SGM is trying to lay this land of all of these things that are happening at the same time. It's a lot. And it's quite stressful, if I'm being honest with you, because you just want certain things for these characters to come to a resolution. And at the peak of things being stressful, you jump to someone else's perspective, and then you have to live their few minutes of that same day or same time. And then you jump to somebody else's perspective. Like, again, I understand what she's trying to convey, which is that all of these things are happening at the same time. And it is that tense and stressful for everybody. But it is making it quite a stressful experience to read because the writing is so good. Everything is so tense. These situations are so shitty for all of these characters. They're just trying to truly survive. And then you throw in Bryce's situation, which is probably, ironically enough, the least tense of all, because I know who the ACOTAR characters are. She is having this dialogue with herself of like, oh, if I tell them too much, they could use it against me. They could agree with the Asteri. What if they're my enemy? But also at the same time, they seem to be able to tell when I'm, not being honest because of this whole truth sayer dagger that Azriel has and whatever. So she's having this experience of trying to figure it out, which rightfully so. She doesn't know them, but I do. And granted, could SJM sit there and throw some twists that ends up having them not fully be in Bryce's corner? Absolutely, because nothing is off the table. But I believe in my heart that would never happen because they've been through a lot of the same similar shit that Bryce is going through right now. They don't jive with that whole, we're going to lead and suck power from people and dominate worlds. They just went through it. They literally just went through it. So to have this stranger come into their world and say, hey, the same shit is happening to me right now, how many thousands of years later in my world, in my time, and I need help, they're going to be nervous about that because they don't want that shit. They don't want that smoke. We already fucking went through this. We're trying to just live our lives now. So please don't at me, right? Don't come for me. So I get the hesitation on everybody's side, but because I know them and believe them to just truly be allies to her in the long run of whatever's going to come out of their relationship, I'm not stressed by it. So her perspective is probably the calmest out of everything that's going on, which is just kind of funny to me. But all of that to say that those thoughts and this whole thought of Crescent City and Akhtar being intertwined is really the biggest feedback that I have on Bryce's whole situation. The whole experience of just those worlds coming together is really trippy for me, but I'm really enjoying that. What I will say is that I didn't necessarily expect Bryce to find out more about her history than she already did. I obviously was certainly hoping she would get answers about how to wield whatever weapons to defeat the Asteri, but I did not expect to get this big story about Thea and how she really ended up being very much the same as the Asteri, just this power-hungry, I'm here to conquer and it doesn't matter who's in my way. She was very much like them. Because we're getting it in the earliest part of this book, in this first quarter of this book, and we're understanding that while it has been served up to Bryce that Thea was this queen and she, had this star power and, was this powerful person, and there's a lot of, for the most part, positivity around her, we're now getting faced with the reality that that's just bullshit. Bryce is angry about that. And Azriel and Nesta obviously are too, because they see the evil in it, even though they don't have these great inherent ties to Thea in the way that Bryce does. But that's the scene I just came off of. Her getting this reality, this whatever it is, memory that is being shared with her in this prison, this history lesson. She's learning that Thea was no better than anybody else who ruled so far. She wanted power. Her having the trove was not enough. She wanted to try to go conquer other worlds, and other people who were around manipulated her to do that. But it didn't, even though they took advantage of her, it didn't make her any less complicit. She didn't care that they were conquering these worlds and killing humans to do it. She wanted something and she went for it. And even though she had some hesitation, which caused her to hide the harp and the horn, because she had some trepidation that some, nefarious shit was about to go down, it doesn't matter. She still made decisions that was power hungry and that was going down a path that she should have never gone on. She didn't allow her people to just have peace. She decided to go down this road of just wanting more power. And that was disappointing. And I was kind of bummed for Bryce in that, because she was sitting there saying exactly that, right? Like, I have this starlight in me, and Adis made it sound like she was just a great person and he loved her, and she just got burned by Pelias and, killed, and he just became power hungry. But she had that moment herself. She was not innocent in all of it. As I say that, I have this realization that it's very much the same with Elena and Aelin in Throne of Glass. Elena was guiding Aelin through many of these things, and she thought that she was trying to help and all of this stuff, and she was, but she wasn't innocent in all of it. She had made choices that had caused a lot of things to happen, or she was using Aelin to get this desired outcome, and it wasn't just for the good of the people. It wasn't just this pure of heart. There was some ulterior motive there. And so you have that same type of thing now playing out here with Thea and Bryce, where you're seeing that this whole vibe of just having these ulterior motives and being power hungry apparently is not uncommon. This is a theme that SJM is grasping towards in all of these timelines and all of these worlds. And obviously that's why there's overlap in all of them. It's just interesting that it's happening now again in Crescent City with Bryce and with Thea. And it's kind of a bummer, because you just want for once there to be a situation where that isn't the case. Why couldn't Thea have just been good and have been innocent and had shitty people around her and she was just caught up in that? Why couldn't that have been a motivating factor for Bryce with her starlight power in her to say, this whole history that she's learning right now could have been slightly different for that to be confirmed, for her to then use that as motivation to say, I'm going to do justice for Thea. I'm going to do right by our people. I'm going to go out and whatever. But instead, she's getting fueled by anger that Thea is no better than the rest of these guys who are power hungry and killing people. And yes, that could still also be motivation on the other side of the spectrum, to have anger be motivation to say, I'm going to be better than those in my past, and I'm going to do what's right for my people, and I'm going to, defeat this evil. You could still get to the same place driven by a different emotion, but it's interesting to me that anger was the one that was chosen in response to Thea, and that her story had to be one of disappointment. I'm a little bit bummed that was the case, but I think, again, what it's reinforcing is that the more that Bryce digs and the more that she finds out, the truth is continuing to be bad. It's continuing to be horrendous and horrible. It's all the more reason for them to do everything that they can to try to make their present state and therefore their future better. And that is the chosen path of motivation for her and these characters in this story. And I think it's going to add a lot of fierceness to this battle when Bryce comes out of the other side of being in the ACOTAR world and gets back with her cronies, because I know she will. She's going to rain down hellfire on these people, and it's just coming from this place again of disappointment and anger. So I was bummed to see that in Thea's story, but I also understand why, and either way, it leaves me excited for the story that is to come. The last thing I want to say is it was crazy to me that we get confirmation that the horn is part of the trove. That blew my mind, because we know that it was made because Nesta says that it's a made object. And then obviously Nesta could sense it and tells her this story about the cauldron and made objects when they're walking through these tunnels and whatnot. But to know that it's the crown, the harp, the mask, and the horn is wild business. And to know that Nesta has the mask, Bryce obviously has the horn in her body, then you have the harp and the crown. Wild development. You feel good about it in a sense when you know these characters because you know them to be good. And so for them to have these weapons of mass destruction, it's like, okay, they're in good hands and safe hands, and they can be the people to do the same thing where they hide it away and they keep it safe and whatever. Obviously, they're not doing that with the mask. The mask is readily available for Nesta to use at any time, and they're just protecting it. But I do worry that them having these objects, and now Bryce knowing that she has a made object within her physical body, this is just going to get really, really dicey. And it's going to be, it changes everything. Like, we knew that the horn was powerful. We knew that they could use it to open portals. But to know that it's a made object and it's part of the trove, that changes a lot of stuff. It even further amplifies how her power, how significant it is, because when she's using the weapon like the Star Sword and she's powered up and she's using her starlight and the horn, like, she's just a warrior that has a level of power that is unmatched, because she can tap into that horn at any time because it's on her physical body. And that's unlike anything we ever saw in ACOTAR. It was always something that they had to hold or wear or whatever. And so she definitely is in a category of her own. And that is exactly why Nesta and Azri are like, what the hell? And they're very, very cautious and have a lot of trepidation towards her. And it makes sense because we know what kind of death and destruction came from the trove and using the cauldron and all of that kind of stuff. And we've seen a lot of really terrible stuff in these stories of Crescent City. And it's been bad in its own right, but this puts it at another level of understanding what kind of power that the Asteria is after and what kind of destruction that they're willing to do. So that was a big revelation, and I was, as much as that was crazy, it made me kind of giddy to know that the trove is not 3, the trove is 4, and Bryce is very much now a part of that, and that blew my mind. So I'm very, very interested and excited to see how the rest of this interaction with the ACOTAR characters goes and where they leave off and when she gets back to her world, which I do hope is very, very soon. Now I want to go ahead and talk about Hunt, Baxi, and Rune and the Hind. And this goes back to feelings that I had before, so I'm bringing this up again. It is a very odd experience to get a lot of description about gore and torture, especially about characters that you really like, juxtaposed with this lightness that Crescent City tends to have. There's always this kind of like humor and levity in parts. And even though what Therian and Ethan and those characters are going through, which I'll talk about next, that they're fighting and the situation that they're in is kind of the everyday shit that they've been going through for a while, for the Crescent City characters as a whole. what Bryce is doing, also kind of the same. Like, yeah, she's in this new world with a language she doesn't know, and she's in a completely different timeline and totally wild. They haven't been through that before, really, but she's safe. And even if she doesn't know that yet, we know that. And she's learning information. And yes, she's gone through some struggles with being in these tunnels and fighting this worm and whatever. But like those areas bring some levity compared to the situation that Hunt and them are in. And so it is really odd for me to be reading their perspectives amongst these other ones, and like for Rune to be like, my small intestine was out on the floor. Like, what do you mean, sir? Like, they're talking about how they're sitting amongst their shit and their piss in this cell. Their dislocated shoulders because they're hanging from the ceiling. Their wings have been cut off and are growing back. Their tongues were cut out. Like, I'm glad that we don't get a lot of scenes graphically talking about those things happening, but those details are peppered in amongst the perspective that we get of them or of the Hind looking in on them. And it's just still really jarring for me. I have a hard time reconciling such grotesque and brutal detail among this just like everyday living that is happening. But I think at this point, because this has happened already several times in these specific Crescent City books, I think at this point it just very much is reinforcing like this is their life. This is their everyday. Unfortunately, they aren't all, they're in an unfortunate circumstance because they're not always the ones who are prisoners and going through this, but this is what their world is. They are either capturing criminals or killing people who are doing bad or, interrogating people kind of in this similar vein for information in order to like save themselves and their people, because that is what they do on this like militaristic warrior side of things that Rune and his friends and Hunt do as a profession. And then you have the rest of the world that Bryce is in and humans are in, where they run bars and they run dance classes and they run museums and galleries and live their life. It's no different than the world that I live in right now, in the sense that I have a job or see people go to school or raise their kids or whatever, but we have militaristic operations where some unsavory shit is going down. So it exists in real world, obviously, and it makes sense that it's coming to life in this story as well, because clearly it's possible. But I just will never really shake how grotesque and bad and awful the torturing and the killing is in these stories, with it just being mixed amongst what seems to be this kind of light stories. I haven't gotten used to that. And maybe that's a good thing, but I don't mean to belabor this point. I just wanted to comment on it. So all of that to say, they're in a very dire situation, these men are. And the one thing I found very touching is what I believe it was Rune had said to Hunt a few chapters ago. He had said the difference, or Hunt had commented on the fact that like I've been here before, and Baxian was like, I never fully appreciated what you went through, because when Hunt was captured and being tortured, Baxian was on the other side. He was with the Hind and the Hellhound, and he was on the side of the people doing the torturing. Hunt had already been through this for years. He was captured and tortured. And so he's here again, and, there's some familiarity, and a lot of what we see from Hunt's perspective is like, is it better that now I have something to fight for and that I'm trying to survive for Bryce, or is it worse because before I had nothing, so I didn't have anything to look forward to or any memories to hold on to, but I don't know if it's better or worse now. He's fighting that, right? He's trying to reconcile all of that. But in this conversation of Hunt mentioning like, well, I've been here before, and Baxian saying like, man, I never really grasped this situation. Rune says it's different this time though. You were alone last time. And it's a very quick conversation and a very small part of these chapters that I've read so far. But you realize that it is the motivating, that is the turning of the tides. That is the part at which they aren't just sitting there waiting to die and waiting for the next torture, where these men start to think like, we can do this. There's 3 of us, and yes, we can't even like hold ourselves up physically, but we can find a way out of this. And so the part that I've left off with them, which is wild, is how they're trying to swing Rune over to get these weapons off of the wall as a way to get free. And Rune's like, just bite my hand off, because their hands are shackled above their head. So he's saying, I'll be able to reach it more if I can fully extend like the side of my body, and like it'll help get my foot over there. Just bite my wrist off, because if you do that, I'll be free of the shackle and then I'll have more reach. And Baxian offers to do it. Hunt was right next to Rune, but Baxian's like, just let me shoulder this burden for you. And Rune is like, it'll grow back anyway. That is what I mean when they're talking about such intense and grotesque stuff, but with this like levity around it. I'm torn about all of this because part of me could cry for them. Part of me like aches for them. They don't deserve it. Even Baxian, as much as he's been a dick, we know his heart now with this whole situation of being mates with Danica, and like he's an ally of theirs and whatever. That's why he's in this prison with them. I hurt for them that they are going through this. I said that I knew that this was going to be something that was going to bond them, and I had all the faith in the world that they were going to get out of it, but I really do kind of ache for them that they have to go through this. It doesn't matter that you as Fae can heal. They are growing back their tongues because their tongues got cut off. They are growing back fingers that got mangled and smashed and burned off. They're growing back wings, which Rune doesn't have any, but Baxian and Hunt got their wings cut off. Hunt, this is the second time in the books that we have actively been with him that he's gotten his wings cut off, but the third time in his life that we know of, at least, that he's gotten his wings cut off. It is so animalistic and it's so sick. That's what makes it hard for it to be right up against this kind of like levity of them like laughing and being like, we're going to just figure it out. But this is the reality for them. So I feel for them a lot. But the one thing I want to comment on before I move on, when Bryce is in the tunnels and gets into this last portion in this prison that she's in currently in terms of where I left off in the book, when she walks in and she sees these symbols and her like world kind of mapped out, her galaxy kind of mapped out and whatever, she says that she sees Orion, the star of Orion, which is Hunt. Hunt is, his name is Orion. There is something with Hunt we have not uncovered. I've said this before, but there is something to him that is hugely important that we haven't even scratched the surface of. Because even when Hunt was in the prison and the demon princes came to him, he saw them in the shadows and like thought he was hallucinating, but they came and talked to him, and they were the ones that said like, Bryce is not with us, which is, wasn't a good thing for Hunt. But there was a dialogue still where they're basically implying to Hunt like, you need to live out and fulfill what your father made you for. And he was like, what are you talking about? I'm very frustrated that it has been alluded to 2 or 3 times now that he has this higher purpose, and that it always just kind of gets left. We don't ever know about it. And so I'm curious if, when I pick this back up, if the rest of the history that Bryce gets from the situation she's in, if she's going to get the answer and then go back and tell him, or if they're going to figure it out together, or what. Or maybe finally the demon princess will just share. But obviously I know this is the 3rd book of this series so far. It's the last one that's out so far. We're going to have to get that answer. I feel pretty confident that we're going to get that answer in this book. I just hope it comes soon. And I think it's going to matter, and it's going to be significant to know that and understand it before they go into the battle with the Asteri. I feel very confident about all of these things. I just want the answer. I just want to know, what was he made for? What is his purpose? What role does he play in all of this? And how does it relate to Bryce? Because here's the thing. Nobody knew unless it was prophesized. And that's why they're saying like, what your father made you for. But the point I was going to make is nobody knew that one of the items of the dead trove was going to be on Bryce's back and like on her person and a part of her magic in her body. So you could sit there and say, well, Hunt was made to be able to activate the horn with his power, and then therefore Bryce is the weapon to be used because she's the horn, so she's part of the trove to be used. And that's the only purpose that Hunt serves. I don't necessarily buy into that in terms of his origin story unless it was prophesized, because how would anybody have known that? Again, unless it was prophesized that this was going to happen somewhere in the olden times, and so Hunt was created for this purpose, and, fate just led them together to be mates, and their combined power together makes them, a powerful user of the trove. of one of the trove objects. Let's put that to the side for a second and say that nobody knew that that was going to happen and those specific events were going to happen. What is the purpose of why Hunt was made? Why was he created? And the choice of the demon prince saying to Hunt, this is what your father made you for, or like, I need you to get out of here so you can fulfill the purpose of why your father made you. He used the word made. And that is interesting because he says part of what the demon prince said to Hunt in that same sentence was like, the crown that you bore on your head has been there all along. What I am curious about with this entire situation is the crown that Hunt wears is a slave crown. That's what gets put on his head when the Asteri own him as a slave and like control him. He had it when Bryce met him. The witch queen removed it and he was liberated and free and whatever. And then now with all the shit he's caused, it's back on his head. But the demon prince is saying like, it's been there. It was there all along. What does that mean? What is Hunt the crown? Is Hunt supposed to represent the crown of the dead trove? But that doesn't make any sense because I'm fairly confident that we have seen the crown in the ACOTAR books and that I thought it was destroyed. But even if it wasn't destroyed, I'm pretty sure that, again, this is one of the things that Nesta has. So it can't be that, like Bryce with the harp, that Hunt represents the crown. But maybe there's some correlation there because he mentions this crown and he mentions being made. I don't know. I'm pretty sure when they talk about objects being made that they capitalize the M. I don't think they did that when the demon prince was talking to Hunt. So I don't think it's a related thing to the trove, but it's a specific word choice that stands out. There's a purpose for Hunt and we don't know what it is. And I'm dying to figure it out. So I really hope that we figure it out soon and that it's something that he can use to his advantage in all of this. Before I talk about everybody else, I want to touch on the Hind. Her role in all of this so far has been pretty low key and compared to what all of the other characters are going through and facing. She's there and we know why she's there and she's serving a purpose in this story so far, but it's nothing crazy in my opinion, except for the part of where we are now where I've left off, which is that Pollux comes back and says to her that they like have healed the harpy. And she's like, I'm so sorry. What do you mean? Because we thought that the harpy died. The Asteri and whatever, apparently salvaged her and have like reformed her somehow. And I don't know if this is going to be one of those situations where they are trying to reanimate somebody. And she's a tester for this whole situation with the frickin' Sophie and her Thunderbirdness, and if the harpy is going to be like our segue into them proving that they can reanimate somebody, and so they're going to try to reanimate Sophie, which I had said in the last book I hope to God doesn't happen because it's just disgusting and disturbing. But the harpy was dead, so unless we find out she actually wasn't and they like saved her and healed her, they reanimated her. That's the only way that I can think that this happened. And obviously I haven't gotten to that point yet where we get the explanation, but where we leave off is Pollux is like, oh yeah, in a couple days time. Well, Lydia's screwed because the harpy knows that Lydia's the one that killed her. And so they will all know the cover's blown. And so of course, in true SJM fashion, this is happening in the time frame where Lydia was trying to have this whole breakout happen. She has been planning this whole thing to save Rune and Hunt and all of them. And she gave everybody 2 days. So I bet my bottom dollar that the day that everybody's supposed to like break out and be free and whatever and go get this boat and go into the ocean and try to find salvation is the day that the harpy comes back and says it was Lydia. And so she's going to be on the run with them and that's going to be her exit to get out. If she survives, she's going to go with them. And maybe she was trying to do that all along and she was never going to stay. But she's not going to have an option now. She's going to have to get the hell out of there. And so, of course, as if everything isn't already stressful enough, let's add one more layer by bringing back someone like the harpy. Please, let's just do that because we don't already have enough going on. So that's really stressful and frustrating. And I actually really wish that wasn't the case. But that, of course, is going to happen. The part that makes me a little bit nervous is finally Rune decides to use the mental bridge to talk to her. and they have this little dialogue. But why she doesn't say, like, she says, like, I'm doing everything I can to help you, and he's just kind of like, fuck off, because he doesn't believe her, right? But why she doesn't say, like, even just word vomit, no, literally, there's a meeting place, your friends are coming to help save you, we're going to be getting on a boat, like, or you're going to be getting on a boat, give me 2 days. Like, I don't understand that. So you have this plan, and then yet Hunt and them are actively trying to get out of this cell. Like, there's no way that Hunt or whatever, Baxian biting off Rune's arm and them getting those weapons and breaking out of this cell and them getting out of this building and whatever is going to be over 2 days. They're not going to survive 2 days loose in that building once people know they're gone. It's like a matter of minutes, really. So I am just curious how that's all going to go. I'm curious of if it's going to all happen too early and this like plan that Lydia had is just going to go to shit, and if her plan is going to make it more complicated or have been really helpful at all. If they, like, I just don't know. I don't know how this is all going to go. This is another one of those moments where I just wish that they would communicate and be clear with each other despite how angry they are or if they hate each other, because she's not being clear with her plan and now he's making his own, and him and the guys breaking out is going to put a dent in her plan, maybe for better, maybe for worse. Maybe for better because the Harpy's coming back, so they do need to get the F out of there. But I don't know. It's all very confusing and stressful. They're in a world of hurt, literally and figuratively, and I really hope they all get out. I really hope that Baxian doesn't die. I could see him being a character that doesn't make it out because his mate's gone. He served his purpose. He's another one like Cormac where he can sacrifice himself. It's possible, but I kind of want him to be out and to be an ally and to make amends with Hunt and like be a part of this little kingdom that they're making. Okay, so let's segue into the last group of people, which is Ethan, Tharian, Declan, Flynn, Declan's boyfriend Mark, Ari the dragon, the sprites, the alpha wolf that Ethan saved. They got a lot of stuff going on. And they're a rather aggravating group, if I say so myself. But I do appreciate the fact that Ethan was like, we have to go save Tharian. We cannot leave him here. We cannot let him just be with the Viper Queen. This is not okay. You're a good one, Ethan. And I think that this is one of those moments where even though he hasn't really exemplified it in these scenes with all of these friends through these chapters so far, I think that is one of those moments of him showing his alphaness. From his point of view, he comments on the wolf that he saved and her alphaness, how he feels drawn to like sometimes like give in to her, and how like her just characteristics by nature is to like lead, and like his inner monologue sometimes is like she's acting so alpha and like she's not the leader of this group. Like you're seeing this kind of interpretation of these things, but to be an alpha is like in your nature, right? So she can't really help it, and she's like living in the world for the first time because she's not in the mystic tank anymore, so she's trying to just figure out what the hell's going on with so many things. And so, of course, she's going to be stubborn and hesitant and angry and all of this stuff. But I think that under all of that, this guidance from Ethan in a way, even though the people aren't really looking at him as like a leader, I think it all in ways kind of adds up to him being as such. And why I say that is because where we leave off is Ethan told the Viper Queen, I'll fight if you let all of us go. And she says, yeah, if you win, sure. And he was gonna fight the dragon, and then she got sold off somewhere, even though Tharian's like, you don't own her. And she's like, well, the agreement that we have was beneficial to her, so she decided to leave. And now Ethan has to fight this alpha wolf. I almost bet that he's going to defeat her. And I don't think she's going to die, but I think this is the moment where Ethan's alphaness is going to come into play. He's going to own it and take it inadvertently in this situation, and I think she's going to end up being a part of his pack, like for real in this whole thing. And I think that even though Declan and Flynn and all of them are not wolves, I think they're going to see him for the first time really as this like powerful leader and not just this like wolf child. And it's going to change everything. I think it's going to be bad. I think it's going to be a brutal fight. I don't think they're going to hold back because they really don't have a choice. I think they're going to give the Viper Queen what she wants so they can just walk away and be done with it. And I say that because I actually really hope that's the case. I really do hope that they they really fully lean in and give her what she wants, and that they just give a good fight so they can be done. Because it would be so nice to put this chapter behind us, to just walk out of these dungeons, all of them together, to just walk out of this meat market and all this grotesque vendors and drugs and situation, and be free with Therian, and just move on to do the thing they need to do, which is try to freaking save everybody else who is in a world of hurt right now, right? They have to get out of here. And I'm honestly pretty sick and tired of the Viper Queen and just everything that she has going on. And Therian is just also really pissing me off right now. So I want this to go the way that it needs to go. I want her to be pleasantly surprised at what she gets out of this fight. And I want all of them to walk away and owe her nothing. The reality of that, though, because Therian was pissed about this whole thing happening, is he told Ethan, the minute I walk out this door, the River Queen's going to want me and going to be hunting me down, because I'm not going to belong to the Viper Queen anymore. I'm going to be like bait, and she knew it. So you basically screwed me. But yet in the midst of this fight about to happen, later on, after he was mad about it, he tells him, like, I will do whatever it takes to prove that it was worth your time and effort in saving me. Like, I appreciate you. At this point, Ethan is Therian's only lifeline. And they told him, like, we are so mad at you that you ever did this. Why didn't you come to us? And you realize that Therian really thought he was on this island on his own and had no friends. And they all were like, no, bro, we had your back. We would have had your back. We would have helped you. Why didn't you come to us? And so it's taking these interactions through these chapters when we're seeing Therian's point of view for him to realize, like, oh man, I did fuck up. Like, I really had more options than I thought. And he panicked in the moment that he went to the Viper Queen. He panicked. So this goes back to my theory that I think now I have a second theory, but the original theory that I had said is that I thought that he was going to get out and he was going to pledge fealty to the Ocean Queen. They're all trying to get to this boat that the Hind set up, and it's through those people in the ocean. She was the one that had worked through them before with Ophion and stuff. So they're all trying to get out to get to this boat that the Hind had set up before, right? And I'm pretty confident that it is with the Ocean Queen again and those mer people. So if Therian gets out of this with the Viper Queen, he's going to be unclaimed. It very well could be that when he goes on this boat that they claim him right then and there, or that he gets his new court. Or they offer and he doesn't because he realizes that Bryce is like a queen now, or that they look at her as such and she becomes his queen. There could be something very poetic about that, where it's not just that Therian's always on the outside as a part of somebody else's kingdom and he's that kind of ally, where he fully comes into the fold, and his character arc in this book is to fully become loyal to these people because of everything they've done for him as his friend. And he's going to pledge loyalty to Bryce. And I would really love that. I would be okay if he did the ocean thing because I understand it. But I think it would be really dope if she's the one that ultimately saves him from anyone hunting him and claiming him. If she's like, he's in my kingdom now. And she owns that whole thing of being a queen. Like when she comes back, because they said that was one of the most touching parts in the last book. Both Rune and Hunt was like, you are our queen, which gives me chills and makes me a little bit emotional thinking about it. I think she's going to come back and be like, yeah, damn straight I am. Let's do this thing, right? And Therian could pledge himself to her. And I think that would be really, really great. All that to say, though, I think that before we get there, this fight, either they're going to like wiggle their way out of it and run from her and be in some kind of debt to her, or have pissed off the Viper Queen, or they're just going to go through with it, give her a good show, really, really fight. But it's going to end up benefiting Ethan, and he's going to be in his alpha bag. And this, the Fender Wolf is finally going to like understand and not just be her alpha self. And he's going to be the alpha. And then ultimately he's going to be able to challenge Sabine at some point in the future. However, the one thing that was interesting about this is, as we've been getting to know this Fender Wolf and her story a little bit and whatever, the story that was told at the time was that her father had, I think the story that had been told is that like her father had died, right? And so Sabine was talking about how like he lied about the number of pups that he had had. She didn't know about this particular child that is now an alpha and is a threat to Sabine. So Sabine was saying like he lied about how many pups he had and whatever. But I could have sworn that somewhere in there that it was communicated that her brother had died, but in reality he had ran, and Sabine knew that. And that's how she knew how many pups he had, but he had lied about it. What I don't know, though, is if he's still alive or not. there is a world in which he's around and he comes out to play and challenge Sabine, and he becomes the new Prime, and Ethan still becomes an Alpha, but he reports into this guy, which was Sabine's brother. That could be interesting, because even if Ethan becomes Alpha, you still have this issue where Sabine will become the Prime at some point when her father dies. So when she gets elevated, the next person gets elevated up, which is generally going to be like Amelie in her court, unless somebody is challenging them all and all of this stuff, right? Well, that's where the Fender Wolf comes in and Ethan comes in, and there is I had for a moment, a flash of time, this thought of like, is her brother going to come back when all this battle goes down, and as a way to like fight and be allies and whatever, and end up taking out Sabine finally, and he becomes the Prime when the Prime inevitably dies and Ethan is the next Alpha. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could still happen with the wolves, and I'm very interested to see how that all comes to life. The other part of this group that is very interesting is that the Hind interacted with the Sprite Queen, because the Sprite Queen is in the Asteries like castle or kingdom or whatever. And the sprites that got out with Ari are like chomping at the bit to get back with their queen and whatnot. I don't know what's going to happen with that. That is like a little tiny storyline that I'm unsure of what's going to go down. I'm not sure if they're going to free her and they're going to have their own little like revolution of freedom, and like they're going to end up being on the side of Bryce and all them because they helped get the queen out. Like I'm not sure. There's something there that obviously matters, and the Hind working with the queen or talking to her or asking the sprites about her, there's an angle there that needs to be worked through, and it's going to end up benefiting Bryce and her allies and stuff. I believe that to be true. But I'm not sure of what all is going to come of that. So interested to see what comes of that. Ari's a little bit of an outlier for me. I don't really have any idea where she's at, because the reality is that when Therian was talking to her, he was like, when you fight Ethan, you cannot kill him, and was saying like he's a really good man and all this stuff and da-da-da-da. And she was basically like, I'm not going to be a part of your group. Like, I don't want to be or whatever. And Therian's like, what do you want? I kind of wish in a way that instead of him being kind of a dick to her, that he would have said, you're welcome to. Like, we've always had open arms to you. We're the ones who saved you, don't forget. Like, Ethan saved you. Let us be the ones to be your people. But she just seems very hesitant to that. So I have a hard time understanding, you know, she could certainly be an ally, but be on the outskirts. She could be one that just never fully comes into the kingdom with Bryce and her friends and just is kind of on the outskirts. I could see that for her because she's so much of a loner and just like this independent soul. I don't know though. There's a part of me that's frustrated with her, but I also have a soft spot for her. So I don't know who quote unquote owns her now, or what deal she made with the Viper Queen to not be in her employ anymore. I hope that it's a good thing. And actually part of me wonders if maybe somehow the Hind got her and like made a deal with her to take her somehow. I don't know. But if it's all for the sake of like the revolution and the rebels and being against the Asteri, I'm here for it. So I'm very interested to see what happens with all of that. All of that to say, that's kind of everything that we've gone through with all of these characters so far. We haven't heard from Bryce's parents at all in these 20 pages or in these 19 chapters, because obviously she's been occupied. We haven't heard anything about Juniper or Fury, so don't know what the hell is going on with them. Everybody else is obviously in a world of hurt in their own version. So we are very much getting close to this point. I would bet in the next quarter of this book, from chapter 20 to, you know, roughly whatever chapter we end on, that's another 200 pages or so in, that Bryce is going to be back, and that Therian and all of them are going to be out, and that Hunt and all of them are going to be out. Whether they're all going to be together in one place and safe and planning, I don't know. But I feel pretty confident we're going to need about half of a book to get through all this shit with the Asteri and the fighting and whatever is going to go down. And so we're getting to that point very quickly where everybody's got to get out of the situations that they're in to get back with each other. It's just a matter of what peace everyone is in when that happens, and if everybody actually makes it out alive. And I hope that they do, but I have a feeling not everybody is going to make it. But yeah, I mean, I had times where I almost wanted to record before I was at this point, but I also wanted to just really keep reading and see what had happened. So I've had a lot of thoughts, but I think I'm reeling almost so much that this is all that I can share, which is still a lot. It is a longer recording for sure, but I think there's still just so much happening. I'm trying to make sense of it. And it's definitely quite a stressful read because of all the branches that are open and all of the things that we're trying to work through. But I'm invested. I'm really enjoying this book. I'm really glad that overall my vibes about the Crescent City stories and the writing style and everything have changed and that I am into it now. It makes me more excited for any future collaboration of ACOTAR and these characters coming together. So certainly much more interested in what's going to come of that with SJM's new books that are coming out and any future work that she does. But yeah, we're at a really tense point. So I am feeling for anybody who's reading this. Obviously, I'm very much in the same boat. We're all in it together. So I thank you all for reading along with me. We have so much book left to go. Let's all hang tough together. We'll be back in no time to talk about the next set of chapters, but so far, a really, really great read. I appreciate you being here and following along. As always, please make sure to engage with my social medias, to follow along with the channels to stay up to date, and we will see you next time, friends.